My name is Shawn. It is a pleasure to be with you this weekend. I have had a blast. I got to be a part of a leadership gathering on Friday night. I ran a half marathon in Tahoe yesterday, which was a lot of fun, and I got to be with you all day today. It really has been a joy. And though I call Las Vegas home, don't tell anybody where I live, you definitely have the prettier part of the state. It is a little bit more beautiful where you live than where I live, and so it's been fun to be a part of it. But I tell you what, as somebody who lives in the Las Vegas area, part of Central Church, we are big fans of the work that God is doing here at Grace Church. And we get to watch from a distance the amazing things that are going on here. I tell you what, your pastor, Pastor Dan, is an amazing man, great leader, fantastic visionary. You're so blessed with him and the leadership of him. But it's not only Pastor Dan. Karen is awesome. The band is amazing. Every person I've interacted with, like, God is doing something special in this place. And it really has been truly a blessing of mine to be a part of it. And there's something about the vision that circulates around this place that's capturing this phrase, hope first. That is such a compelling vision. And how God is using this community to be a light in darkness. And how God is using this community to be a beacon of hope in this particular area. And I believe that you've only scratched the surface. What God is going to do through you is greater than anything that you could have ever asked or imagined. And I can't wait to continue to see how that vision unfolds. But I love the name of the initiative, Hope First. There's something about the word hope that's so special, I think, in my heart, but I think it's special in all of our hearts, right? I'm convinced that hope is the fuel of our hearts. It's the fuel of our lives. That our hearts, our lives can't function without hope. You know, sometimes we get to places that we feel like, things are getting a little bit difficult. We may say that, oh man, I'm just feeling so tired, or my life feels so dry, or things are really tough. And though we may be tired, though it may be a little bit dry, maybe something else is going on. Maybe we've lost sight of hope. Because again, I think that hope is the fuel of our hearts and our lives. And though we as a church get to be a beacon of hope in our community, I believe that God also wants to plant hope in your life. And so wherever you're at, whatever brought you here this evening, my prayer is that you leave here today with more hope than you had when you came. And so I just want to ask that you might open yourself to receive the hope that God wants to give you this evening. So if you got a Bible, we're going to be in the book of Luke chapter 24 today. If you don't have a Bible, no worries. We're going to put the words on the screen as well. Now, Luke is one of the gospel writers. He wrote one of the biographies about Jesus. There were some amazing things that Jesus did, all that he saw and teach, so on and so forth. But the story he records in Luke chapter 24 is a unique story to Luke. None of the other biography writers wrote this story about Jesus. But what a compelling story of hope that he captures about Jesus. Now, if we're going to be people who really lean into the hope that God wants us to receive, I think the first principle we got to take hold of is this. We learn to expect God in unexpected places. We learn to just expect God to show up in very unexpected places. And so the setting of Luke chapter 24 is Resurrection Sunday. Jesus is just hours before sprung from the grave. And here's what Luke records for us in chapter 24, verse 13. It says this. Now that same day, two of them were going to a village called Emmaus, about 7 miles from Jerusalem. They were talking with each other about everything that had happened. As they talked and discussed these things with each other, Jesus himself came up and walked along with them, but they were kept from recognizing him. And so again, this story begins, help us understand the setting. We are on Resurrection Sunday. Now let's rewind the tape and remember where we've come from. Friday was a dark day in Jerusalem. Friday was the day that Jesus was arrested. He was tried, but let's be honest, it wasn't really a trial. It was a travesty of justice. Eventually, he was sentenced to be crucified. He was forced to carry this cross up to this hill called Golgotha, where he was put on public display as a criminal. His hands were pierced, his feet were pierced, and he was left there to die. And if you were somebody who was a resident in Jerusalem at the time, it would have been a moment of great disillusionment, a great disappointment, total confusion. Because you would have thought and maybe even hoped that Jesus was the one promised by God. That maybe he was the Messiah, maybe he was the anointed one, maybe he was the one who was going to free all of Israel, and they put their hopes in him, and all of a sudden those hopes came to a screeching halt on that Friday. And as darkness enveloped the whole land, it felt as though darkness had won. But the good news is, that's not the end of the story. The good news is, just a couple days later, Jesus sprung to life. He sprung from the grave. My friends, the tomb is empty. I would go as far to say that Jesus punched death in the face that particular day. And as he took up life in order to share that life with you and I. The truth is, you and I don't serve a dead God. You and I serve a God who is living. He is active. He is at work in your life. He is at work in my life. Our God is at work in the world. Our God is a living and active God. I would go as far to say this. That Sunday is the single greatest day in all of human history. There is not a single day in all of human history that can top that day. Because that was the day that not only God took on life, that was the day that God made life possible for you and I. And so what do if you're God? And you just made possible the greatest day in all of human history. How do you get the news out? How do you let everyone know what has just taken place, that Jesus has just conquered death? Now, if I were God, which by the way I'm not, if you were God, like what would you do? Like how would you make this amazing message known? I mean, if it were up to me, I would have held some sort of impressive event. I would have had anybody of influence come to this event. I would make sure you have a lot of Twitter followers. I'd make sure you have a good social media following. I'd make sure all the media outlets were there so they could broadcast this message so that everybody could get this message. I would at least make sure that really important people, those of incredible influence, would be there, because that way we could get this story out faster. I would do something like that. But what does God do on the day that is regarded as the single greatest day in all of human history? What does he do in those moments? Well, what Jesus did is he goes for a walk on a road to Emmaus. Hours after springing from the grave, he goes on a walk on a road to Emmaus. You might say, well, where's Emmaus? We don't really know. It was such an ordinary town and such an insignificant town, you can't even really plot it on a map. We don't know. All Luke tells us is it's 7 miles from Jerusalem. Other than that, we don't know. Now, you can travel to Jerusalem today, and you can take a tourist guide on the road to Emmaus, but any good tour guide will tell you we're not really sure that this is the actual road. Because it was such an insignificant place, we don't know where it's at. It was there's nothing important about the town. And not only was it an unimportant destination, Jesus is interacting with these two people. Who are these two people? We don't really know. We know one of them's name was Cleopas. We're going to call him Cleo because it's easier for me to say, but we don't even know the other person's name. We might assume that maybe it's a spouse, maybe it's a friend, traveling companion. We don't really know. But who was Cleo? I don't know. There's nothing else in all of Scripture that says anything about Cleo. We don't know who he was. We don't know where he did. We don't know if Emmaus was his home. All we know is that he was a follower of Jesus. Other than that, he's kind of an insignificant figure as far as Scripture is concerned. And so think about this moment. It's the single greatest day in all of human history. And what does God do to announce the message? He goes on a walk to an insignificant place with an insignificant group of people. And what I've discovered about God is this, is God tends to show up in unexpected ways, in unexpected places. And notice, they don't recognize him. They're walking on this road to Emmaus. They're actually talking about Jesus when Jesus shows up. And they don't recognize him. Somehow he is in their midst, but they don't quite get it. It kind of reminds me of those moments when I lose things around the house. I'm notorious for losing stuff. I'll lose my wallet or my keys or my hat. I lose stuff all the time. And you would think as a 40-year-old, I would learn, just put it in the same spot every day, and then I would know where it is. I don't know why I haven't learned that lesson, but almost on a daily basis, I'm turning the house upside down. I'm looking in pockets. I'm looking in drawers. I'm looking all over the place because I can't find something. And so inevitably, when I am out of options, I'll go to my spouse and I'll say, hey, babe, do you know where my wallet is? And there have been a number of times that she'll say, you mean that right there on the counter right in front of you? And I'm like, what a dork. I looked everywhere and it was right in front of me the whole time. There was a moment, I kind of am a little bit ashamed to admit this, there was one time I couldn't find my hat anywhere. I looked all over for it. I eventually went to her and I said, babe, have you seen my hat? And she goes, are you serious? And I said, of course I'm serious. She says, it's on your head, dummy. And I'm like, oh, what a dummy, right? But there are moments that I can't find something that is right in front of me. And that's the experience of these two people on the road to Emmaus. They're talking about Jesus when Jesus shows up and they don't recognize him. But I can't be too hard on them. So there's been many times in my own journey that I've experienced the same thing spiritually. I mean, have you ever had a situation in life that you experienced so much loss or disappointment or confusion that it's left you asking the question, where is God in all of this? You ever been there? Maybe you're more spiritual than me, but I've been there before. Probably most recently was over the summer. My father-in-law, just an amazing, amazing man, one of the more life-giving people you'll ever be around, was diagnosed with a very aggressive form of cancer. And it was kind of one of those moments that your world gets flipped upside down. Your heart just wants to know why. And God, where are you at in all this? And God, what are you up to in all this? And it's so difficult to kind of figure out. And in those moments of great disappointment and great disillusionment and great confusion, sometimes our heart asks the question, God, where are you in all this? And what the story in Luke chapter 24 reminds us is God is ever present in our midst. That though sometimes we can't see him, that doesn't mean he's not there. And though we can't feel him, that doesn't mean he's not there. That there's never any place that you will ever go in your existence that you're outside of the power and the presence of our great God. God is always with you. And sometimes we face disappointment, and sometimes we face loss, and sometimes we face disillusionment and confusion. But I tell you, in those moments, God is with us. Expect God to show up in unexpected ways, in unexpected places. If God is a God, on the greatest moment of all of human history, he's willing to take a walk to an insignificant town with an insignificant group of people. It reminds us that there's never anything too insignificant for our great God to be present in our lives. God is always with you. When you're in the hospital undergoing treatment for cancer, God is with you. When you're battling in a relationship that really feels like it's going south, that God is with you. When you experience job transition, your life gets flipped upside down, your finances are completely wrecked, God is with you. When your son or daughter is making self-destructive choices, I promise, God is with you. And the greatest news about that is wherever there is God, there is hope. Wherever God's presence exists, there's hope. And so we learn to simply expect God to show up in unexpected ways, in unexpected places. And when we do so, we position our lives to be able to truly embrace the journey. It's the second principle that's really important for us to understand, that we simply learn to embrace the journey. Look how Luke continues the story in Luke chapter 24. He says this. He's talking about Jesus. He says, Jesus asked them, what are you discussing so intently as you walk along? They stopped short, sadness written across their faces. Then one of them, Cleopas, replied, you must be the only one in Jerusalem who hasn't heard about all the things that have happened there in the last few days. What things? Jesus asked. It's kind of a great moment. I love the humor of Jesus at the moment. Again, they're talking about Jesus when Jesus shows up. And Jesus says, hey, what are you guys talking about? And you can almost feel they're a little put off by the question. Like, how do you not know what's just happened? It's kind of like those moments that maybe we've even experienced in our own country when we have this collective experience of maybe a great tragedy that you can't not talk about it the next day, right? I mean, think about the day after 9/11 happened in 2001. And think about the conversations you had. You couldn't help but talk about it. We couldn't talk about anything else. And imagine somebody would come up to you as you're talking about the collapse of the Twin Towers and say, hey, what are you talking about? You'd be like, how do you not know what's just happened? I think about even in our own city, in the Las Vegas area. Last year on October 1st, we experienced the greatest mass shooting on American soil, and it flipped our community on its end. I'm telling you, you couldn't go anywhere without interacting with someone who had a connection to a victim. And you couldn't talk about anything else. And I imagine in that season, if somebody were coming up to us and say, hey, what are you talking about? What was going on? You'd be like, how did you miss everything that happened? And that's kind of what's going on in this moment. Make no mistake about it. Nobody would have missed the events that took place in Jerusalem on that Friday. Because all their hopes, their dreams were tied to this person named Jesus. They thought that maybe he was the one that could deliver them. But all of a sudden, they didn't expect the Messiah to be crucified. And in those moments, in a sense, their hope was crucified with him. And they couldn't help but talk about it in those moments. And notice when Jesus says, well, tell me about what happened. They began to tell Jesus about Jesus. And here's what they say. They said that the things that happened to Jesus, the man from Nazareth, they said, he was a prophet who did powerful miracles. He was a mighty teacher in the eyes of God and all the people. But our leading priests and other religious leaders handed him over to be condemned to death, and they crucified him. We had hoped that he was the Messiah who had come to rescue Israel. All this happened 3 days ago. Then some women from our group of his followers were at his tomb early this morning. They came back with an amazing report. They said that his body was missing, and they had seen angels who told them that Jesus is alive. Some of our men ran out to see, and sure enough, his body was gone, just as the women had said. Now notice, as these two individuals begin to tell Jesus about Jesus, they talk to him about not only the events of Friday, they also talk to him about the events of Sunday, but which one are they actually focused on? They're focused on the events of Friday. Again, they left Jerusalem. They're saddened. They're downcast. They're so disappointed. They're disillusioned. They're confused. They can't see Sunday because they're completely focused on Friday. And now I know why they didn't recognize Jesus. Now I know why they missed him. Because sometimes our past can blind us from seeing Jesus in the present. Sometimes our focus on our past has a blinding effect of our ability to see Jesus at work in the present. And I'm not sure why that is. Maybe it's somewhat of a human nature thing that when it comes to positive related things and negative related things, for whatever reason, our focus can shift to negative things. Case in point may be if I were to say to you, or maybe let's just say that there were 8 or 9 people that approached you tonight, and they came up to you and they just gave you compliments. Man, your hair looks great today. Wow, you're finely dressed today. I just love your personality. You have a great family. And they just showered you with compliment after compliment after compliment, person after person after person. And then one yoo-hoo comes up to you and says something critical. Which one do you remember? We remember the criticism. Why is that? I've heard other studies that were done that those who journal tend to journal about negative events in their lives 3 to 1 compared to positive things. And sometimes the past, particularly negative events, can blind us to God's great work in our lives in the present. And so one of the most mindful things that we do from a spiritual perspective is that we learn to recognize that life is a journey, and we learn to simply embrace the journey. And we recognize that there are highs and lows, there are ups and downs, there are goods and bads, and the truth is that God is with us every single step of the way. God is with us in the highs and the lows. He's with us in the goods and the bads. He's with us every single step of the way. And what I'm discovering more often than not, what I recognize is that God is a God of the journey. Now, I want God to be a God of the destination, because I want God to fix stuff in my life. You know, when something goes wrong, I want God to change the circumstance, and if it's up to me, I would like him to change it quickly. And so I'll pray to God. God, heal the cancer. God, restore the marriage. God, right-side the financial situation. I want God to be a God of the destination. Now, I'm not suggesting you shouldn't pray for those things. You should absolutely pray boldly, specifically, powerfully. You should absolutely pray for the things that you desire for God to really show up and do in your life. But I also believe this. God is not just a God of the destination. God is a God of the journey. Because God is not into just changing circumstances. God is into changing you. God wants to change us in our heart. I would go as far to say this. What God does in us while we wait is just as important, if not more important, than what we're waiting for. Let me say that again. what God does in us while we're waiting, while we're on the journey, is just as important, if not more important, than what we're waiting for. And we learn to embrace the journey, knowing that God is with us every step of the way. And the second piece of it, I would encourage us to always have the spiritual posture that we choose to never judge the road before the journey's complete. You know, so many times I will again start questioning things, and I'll start being frustrated. I'll start being very disappointed of what the perspective is that God doesn't show up in the way that I wanted Him to. And sometimes we start judging the road before the journey is actually complete. It reminds me of a couple of months ago. My oldest son turned 11 years old. And as a family, we love to give gifts. We love to do birthdays big. But I have really started leaning away from actual tangible gifts. And I love to give experiences to my kids. Because my experience has been this, that if I give them a tangible gift, they'll be really excited. They'll play with it for about 48 hours. It will end up on a shelf, and then we give it to Goodwill a couple of years later. That's what tends to happen. And so I love to give experiences, because experiences have a life well beyond the actual moment. And so for my son's 11th birthday, my wife and I were trying to figure out what should we do. And what we know is his favorite band is the Imagine Dragons. I thought, how cool would it be if we got to take him to his very first concert and happened to be the concert of his favorite band? So we looked at their touring schedule. We found out that they were playing on his birthday in San Francisco. And I went to my wife and I was like, hey, we've got some airline points. We got some points for the hotel. I think we can do this very cost affordably. How amazing would this experience be? And she was in on it. We were excited about it. We purchased this gift probably 3 months in advance, which gave me plenty of time to pump him up for his 11th birthday. And so I started seeding it, like right away going, oh, buddy, your dad is Dad of the Year. We have gotten the greatest gift that any 11-year-old has ever gotten, right? This is going to be the greatest birthday of all time. One day you're going to be 75 years old. Somebody's going to ask you, which was your favorite birthday? And you're going to tell them, my 11th birthday was my favorite birthday. And so I went on and on. I'm egging this thing on over a 3-month period. The reality is, I probably created such a high bar that there was nothing that I could have given him that would have delivered to my expectations. A little bit of a hashtag parent fail, but I learned my lesson. But I remember the moment, like the day of his birthday. He didn't know anything other than this is going to be an awesome, awesome birthday. And we handed him a box. And in the box, I put together this airplane out of Legos. And then we put the tickets to the concert, trying to see if he could put it all together. And I was on the edge of my seat as he's opening this gift. And he opens it up. He sees the airplane. He pulls out the tickets. And I'm watching the wheels turn into his own mind. And then the moment happened where he clicked. He got it. And his face turned really sad, and he started crying. And I thought, what? That was not what I thought you would do in this moment. And so I thought, oh, they're tears of joy. They were not tears of joy. And I was like, buddy, tell me what's going on. He goes, Dad, I don't want to go. I'm like, what do you mean you don't want to go? We're getting on a plane in less than 2 hours. And we got to change this really, really quickly, right? And I began to kind of listen to him. He was so resistant to the whole idea. And so I listened to him talking about it. He's like, but Dad, I get motion sick. Planes make me sick. And a long car ride, it makes me sick. I don't want to be sick on my birthday. And the truth is, he'd never been to a concert. He didn't know what to expect. He didn't know what a concert was like. And so all that he could think about from his perspective was an idea of a day that didn't really sound like a lot of fun to him. And so I said, okay, buddy, I get it. But will you trust me? Will you trust me that this is actually going to be better than you think it's going to be? And so eventually, it took a little bribery, some gummy bears and chocolate, but we headed to the airport. And we got on that plane, and we landed in San Francisco, and we got to tour around a little bit in San Francisco in the afternoon as we bought time waiting for the concert. We eventually get to this concert, and I got to watch the concert through the eyes of my 11-year-old, watching his favorite band as he sung every single lyric. It was a moment. It was probably the best birthday gift I've given myself. It was in a moment getting to experience that with my kid. I remember when it came, when it was all done, I knew deep down that he had an amazing experience, but he didn't really say much about it. Well, a couple of weeks ago in his English class, they had to write about an event over the summer, and he wrote about going to see his favorite band, the Imagine Dragons. He was so excited to bring it home, and I read his paper, and he talks about, it was titled, The Greatest Birthday Ever. And at the end of the night, as I was putting to bed, he just said to me, and this is months later, he said to me, Dad, thank you for making that such a special day for me. Now, it was a powerful lesson for me personally. Why? Because so often I do the same thing. I judge the road before the journey's complete. Embrace the journey. It's got some ups and downs, some highs and lows, and some good and bads. But God is a God of the journey. And what God is doing in us while we wait is just as important, if not more important, than what we're waiting for. So learn to expect God to show up in unexpected places. Embrace the journey, and then you posture your life to live in hope. Live in hope. You know, as Luke records the story, kind of as it comes to conclusion, they eventually arrive at Emmaus. And these two travelers, they turn to Jesus not knowing it was Jesus, and they invite him in. And Jesus kind of thinks to himself, it's Resurrection Sunday. I got nothing better else to do. And so he goes into their house and shares a meal with them. And this is what happens. It says, when he, meaning Jesus, was at the table with them, he took bread, gave thanks, and broke it, and began to give it to them. Then their eyes were opened, and they recognized him. It was kind of the moment that they had this aha moment that all this time, this traveler that was with them was Jesus himself. He was alive, and because he was alive, there is hope. They began to see, and they began to see clearly. Have you ever had a moment that you weren't able to see clearly, and then all of a sudden, everything came into focus? For me, my eyesight has always been atrocious. I've had glasses since I was 2 years old. I don't even know how you determine that a 2-year-old needs glasses. Maybe I was running into walls or something. I'm not really sure. But I've had glasses really for all my life. And so I've been in and out of a lot of eye doctors, and many of you probably had the same experience that I do, that every eye doctor experience is the exact same. They sit you in the chair. They remove any kind of glasses or contact lenses. They put the eye chart in front of you, which is way too far away. And they begin to say, hey, read for me the lowest line you can possibly read. Well, I can't read anything. I mean, I got nothing, squadoosh. The only thing that I've got going for me is that in 40 years of my life, they've never changed the big E at the top. So I know that that's an E. And truly, I can't see the big E, but it makes me feel better about myself if I tell them that that's an E. And so the doctor's always very encouraging. Yes, Shawn, that's an E. Well done, right? And so, but I can't read anything. But eventually, they put this contraption over your head, and they begin to dial stuff in. And they said, Shawn, tell me which one's clearer, A or B? 1 or 2? And I'm like, Doc, I got nothing. I can't see Jackus Crackus with either one of them, right? You got to work a little bit more on this. And so they just continue to do the same routine over again. A or B, 1 or 2. And they keep going and going and going. And eventually, the good eye doctors, they can start dialing it in. And all of a sudden, that which I could not see, all of a sudden becomes clear to me. And it's an amazing, amazing experience to be able to see with clarity that which wasn't clear before. And that's what's going on in the story. They weren't able to see, but all of a sudden, they got a new lens. My friend, the lens was hope. They got to see things through a different perspective. The truth is, nothing changed in their circumstances. What changed was their perspective. And the same two individuals that walked away gloomy from Jerusalem were the same individuals that raced back to Jerusalem excited. Luke records it for us in a couple of verses later. It says this: they got up, they returned at once to Jerusalem. There they found the 11 and those who were with them assembled together, saying, "It is true, the Lord has risen." They were given a new lens. They were able to see things through a different perspective. My friends, it changed everything. Because your heart, your life runs on hope. It is the fuel of our existence. And sometimes we journey through life. And maybe we walked in here today, much like these two travelers walked away from Jerusalem, somewhat downcast, somewhat saddened, somewhat confused, somewhat disillusioned. But I pray that maybe tonight
that God would give you a new perspective, that you could leave looking through the lens of hope. Wherever you're at, whatever's going on in your journey, my friends, there's hope. Because hope tells us that no matter what's going on in our journey, nothing in this life is final. Cancer is not final. There is hope. Relational challenges that we face, they are not final. There's hope. Financial struggle, it's not final. There's hope. And struggle with addiction, it is not final. My friends, there is hope. There is hope. There is hope. There is hope. Because of our great God and what He's done through His Son Jesus. I don't know what's going on in your journey. But God knows your journey intimately. And He is with you. He is for you. He wants to give you hope. Here's what I like to do in closing. I'd love to just ask that you just bow your heads with me and close your eyes. With every head bowed, with every eye closed, if you're somebody today, no matter what's going in your journey, but you feel like, man, I really need a sense of God's hope, would you just acknowledge that by raising your hand in the air? Just saying, God, I need your hope today. Father, I just want to pray a prayer for every single person that's reaching out to you in this moment. Father, I just ask that more than anything, they can experience your presence. Because, God, we believe that wherever your presence is, there's hope. So, Father, give us hope in our relational struggles. God, give us hope in our addiction. God, give us hope in our parenting. God, give us hope in our medical diagnoses. God, I just ask that you give us hope. May we live expecting you to show up in unexpected places. May we open our lives and be willing to allow you to be a part of the journey, every single step of the journey. God, give us a new lens to see. Help us look through a lens of the hope that we find in you. Father, we're grateful for you. We're grateful for the life and the hope that you've given us in Jesus. We pray that in His powerful name. Amen.